Why do baby boomers own everything? Last week, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reported that the top 10% of Americans account for half of consumption, calling it, quote, unsustainable. This 10%, of course, is overwhelmingly baby boomers who spent the past 50 years having their assets pumped by the Federal Reserve while voting for big government that knocks the first rungs out of the career ladder for the young. The end result is boomers with vacation chalets, while for the young, wages are flat, prices are up, and buying a house or starting a family is a pipe dream. Instead, they lurk in mom's basement fantasizing about the revolution. The numbers come from Moody's Analytics, who finds that the top 10% of Americans accounted for just 36% of consumer spending 30 years ago, but now it's up to 49.7%. It's getting worse fast. In Biden's last year, the top 10th increased spending by 12%, while the other 90% of Americans actually spent less. So that's a so-called K-shaped economy, with the top living it up while everybody else gets killed. In fact, over Biden's 4 years, spending by the bottom 80% of Americans was flat, while the rich increased spending by nearly a third. Earlier this week, I mentioned how the Fed seems to be running policy based on the stock market, and this is part of the reason why. The rich are holding up the entire economy. It means stock prices and home equity are holding up the entire economy. A few years ago, the Washington Post published a chart showing shares of national wealth by generation. So by the time they were in their mid-30s, boomers owned 20% of the wealth in America. For Gen X in their 30s, it was 8.5%. For millennials in their 30s, it's not even 3%. So how did this happen? There's two main causes: growing government and the Federal Reserve. Between 1990 and today, inflation-adjusted federal spending more than doubled. Federal regulations have gone from 118,000 pages in 1990 to over 180,000 today. Regulation hits small business startups much harder. Manufacturing, for example, regulation costs small companies twice what it costs big business, who get to spread it over a bigger base. In fact, according to the National Association of Manufacturers, regulations cost small manufacturers more than salaries cost. Crippling small business knocks out the first rungs on the ladder. And by one estimate, native-born business formation is down 85% since 1990. Even bigger is the Federal Reserve. Since 1990, the Fed's average real interest rate has been just 0.1%. In other words, 35 years of free money. This has been amazing for boomers because zero interest rates make stocks and house prices soar. To illustrate, before boomers, in the 35 years from 1955 to 1990, both house prices and stocks went up by half, so 47-49% after inflation. In the 35 years since 1990, house prices went up 124%, stocks went up 600%. So anybody who owned a house in 1990 is rich. Anybody who owned stocks is a millionaire. And if you didn't own a house or stocks in 1990, you got the inflation that paid for it all. So what's next? Brought to you by Unchained.com. The solution is very easy. Radically shrink the government, both dollars and scope, and get rid of the Fed. Leave interest rates to the market. Limit money printing to either a fixed rate of growth, a so-called K% rule, or ideally to hard assets. Read the rest with charts and all the gory details at ProfStAnj.com. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.